الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So welcome to another installment of Studying the Sermon, and thank you all for coming. And as you know, in this segment, what we do is we take the day's sermon and we put it under a microscope. And we dissect it, we deconstruct it, and most importantly, we discuss it. We give you an opportunity to ask any questions you might have, to make any comments you'd like to make, and to enrich our coverage of the topic. And today, we talked about religion being easy. As the Prophet said in the Hadith, إِنَّ الدِّينَ يُسْرٌ وَلَنْ يُشَادَّ الدِّينَ أَحَدٌ إِلَّا غَلَبَهُ. He said, indeed, certainly, without question, religion is very easy. And no one will inconvenience or overburden themselves in religious matters, except that ultimately, they'll abandon religion altogether. They'll throw up their hands. They'll give up. It'll be too much for them. So we've established from the tongue of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was Sadiq al-Masduq that religion is easy, but we have a tendency to make it hard. And we talked about one example of how we made something that is easy in the religion, we made it hard, and we mentioned marriage, the issue of marriage. And we talked about how we, as Muslims, as a Muslim community, have made it difficult. We talked about unfounded stipulations which are not supported by our religion. In fact, our religion is opposed to them. We talked about arbitrary conditions. And we talked about culture-based no's. No. Why? Because I say so. No. Why? Because that's just not the way we do things. But Islam says, I don't care what Islam says. No. Culture-based no's. I want to digress a little bit and talk about something we didn't talk about. But it's a reality. And it makes marriage difficult in the Muslim community. And that is stigmatizing certain forms of marriage. Let me say that again. Stigmatizing certain forms of marriage. Does everybody know what stigmatizing means? Somebody tell me what it means so we make sure we're all on the same page. Stigmatizing, what does that mean? Anybody? Stigmatize something. What does it mean to stigmatize something?
Put a negative connotation on something. Put a negative connotation on something.
Ahsan. That basically, you paint something with a negative brush. You paint it in a light, or you put it in a way, you describe it, or you treat it, or you define it in a way that makes it something negative. Something that if people do it, they'll be considered bad. So we stigmatize certain forms of religion. This is another thing that makes marriage difficult in the Muslim community. Now I'll give you some examples. So we stigmatize marriage for seniors. We stigmatize marriage for seniors. For example, a man of 60 years old, a woman of 50 years old, people will say to them, you're too old to get married. You're too old to get married. Too old to need companionship? Too old to not want to be alone? Too old to not want to be able to wake up and have a companion? Have somebody there to sit and drink coffee with? Too old for that? People say that. People say to people who are in their 50s and 60s, you're too old to get married. They stigmatize it. They make them feel bad for one to be married, and that forces them to what? To not get married because they're afraid of what people will say if they do. How they've been treated, how they might be ostracized. because they're too old to get married. We stigmatize that. Another example, marriage for financially independent women. Women with high-level degrees or specialized skills who can fend for themselves. A woman who's a divorcee or a widow who wants to get married but happens to be what? Able to fend for herself. Other women will tell her, why do you want to get married? What do you need a man for? What do you need a husband for? You work at such and such company, you have such and such degree, you have such and such job. Why do you want to do that? Why do you want to have somebody you have to cook for and to clean for and have to answer to? You're an independent woman, you're a strong woman, you're a capable woman, you can fend for yourself, as if in their mind, a man is a meal ticket. And if you don't need a meal ticket, if you don't need somebody who can financially yunfiq alayk, you don't need somebody who can maintain you financially, then you shouldn't get married. You shouldn't bother with a man. So that woman who wants a companion, but she can fend for herself, feels uncomfortable, embarrassed, afraid to get married because of how people will look at her, how people will treat her, what they will say about her behind her back. We stigmatize that, and so a person like that who wants to be married won't get married. That makes marriage difficult. Another example is stigmatizing, for example, plural marriage. A man having more than one wife. Sometimes people don't go about it the right way, and that's unfortunate. But we shouldn't stigmatize polygamy, which is something Islamically sanctioned, because of how people go about it. But we stigmatize it. And so there are people who would like to get married, and this might be an option for them, but they won't get married because they're afraid of how they'll be ostracized, how they'll be treated, how they'll be spoken about if they do that. So this is something we did mention in the khutbah, but I wanted to mention it because it's another way that we make marriage difficult, and something we need to put ourselves on notice. We need to stop doing that. Stop telling people what they should and shouldn't do for their own happiness. We need to stop doing that. Stop stigmatizing marriage. Now, I didn't want to talk a lot because I want to hear from you. I particularly want to hear from the shabab, the young people. But before I turn the floor over to you, I wanted to share with you just two. I wanted to share with you, as I told you, one of the things that prompted me to give the khutbah that I gave was interactions and conversations I'd had with young people expressing their frustration. And some of them actually wrote to me. One of them wrote to me on Messenger, and we had a really good conversation back and forth. And one of them sent me a very heartfelt message on WhatsApp, pouring out his heart about his frustration. And I asked their permission to share some of what they said, so you can just get an idea of what's going on, and then we can talk about it. So one of the young people who was interested in marriage, he reached out to me, as I said, on Messenger, and he was trying to convince me to support what they call Muslim marriage mixers. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that. Muslim marriage mixers. So basically, there are different forms of it, and I'll mention them out of Ujada. So one of the variations is basically just singles networking. It's just basically singles networking. And one example of that is, for example, they'll have like a singles hike. They'll identify a place where they're going to go, and they're going to do some hiking, and there'll be young eligible bachelors and bachelorettes. And they'll descend on that place, and I guess groups of two, one young man, one woman, will hike together. And in the course of hiking together, they'll kind of what? I guess get to know each other. And there was actually one recently sponsored by the Islamic Society of Baltimore, about a couple weeks back. That's one example. Another one is they'll create these like social groups, these social networks. We're talking about people who get together at a coffee shop, get together at some other public space. They'll play games, they might play charades, they might play checkers, whatever. And they'll just socialize. You create social networks. Another way that they do it, which is the way that he was trying to encourage me to support, was something which resembles speed dating amongst the non-Muslims. You guys ever heard of speed dating? Speed dating is basically where certain people remain seated and other people move about. So for example, the ladies might stay seated and boys will go about for 5 minutes or 3 minutes or whatever number of increments, and they'll sit with these girls and talk to them about whatever, and then at the end, I guess they'll determine if they are compatible or if they like each other, and then somehow, some way, information will be exchanged by the coordinators of these events. So he was trying to convince me that this is something that we should do here in the Hampton Roads area, and would I be okay with it? Would I push it, campaign for it, etc.? So obviously he didn't convince me about that. He didn't convince me. We had a pretty good conversation, pretty good back and forth about that. I told him how I felt about it, why I felt about it, why I felt the way I felt about it. But what he did convince me was that we need to do something. That these young people are under a tremendous amount of pressure. Their stipulations, constraints are being imposed upon them, and they're rebelling against them and finding alternative means like these mixers, which are in different levels and degrees and variations, drawing closer and closer to the line of haram. I don't necessarily say any of them cross the line, but they're pretty close. And this is something we have to be very careful with. Our young people, they don't have a really good grasp on what Islam is. But they do have a grasp on what they want and what they need. And when you want something, and you don't know what Islam says about as far as guidelines of how to go about doing it, that's a very dangerous potion right there. And so you got these young people getting out here and doing what they think they need to do to find their soulmate, and they're skirting what? Skirting the line between halal and haram. I say all this to say is that he didn't convince me, like I said, about the mixers, but he did convince me that we need to do something and give our youth a halal alternative or a means to find someone to spend the rest of their life with. And one of the things that he said before I mention a good excerpt of his message, I want to say, he said this: I think there are lots of different options. I think it's important for community elders to broach these topics and create halal opportunities to meet. And that's true. He said a lot of things that I didn't agree with, but that right there, that's the truth. We got to talk about this. We have to figure out something. We have to respond. Our religion is a religion of responding to problems. We are not the people who there's a problem and we just sit dumbfounded. Our religion is a religion built to solve problems, built to meet the challenges of every day. Ma anzalallahu min da' illa anzalahu dawa. Allah has not created a problem except that He created a solution. Alimahu man alima wa jahilahu man jahila. Some people know it and some people don't know it, but it's there in Islam. Let me read to you some of what he wrote. He said, so I was born here, but my parents are from India. I can tell you that many young people from immigrant families, whether born here or otherwise, are fooling around on their own outside the knowledge of their families because there are a lack of halal venues to find people. Also, most don't want to just agree to marry someone with minimal interaction or very rigidly supervised interaction. I was talking to one girl who was very honest with me. And she told me she had, now listen, I'm going to read the message as it is. The raw message as it is. And we have to hear it just the way he said it, so we know what's going on. We can't stick our head in the sand. We got to know what's going on so we can respond accordingly. He said, I was talking to one girl who was very honest with me and told me she had had 4 sexual partners. But she also said they were all Muslim. As if that makes it better. Maybe it does, I don't know. I'm older, and I have refrained from relationships through being very busy and finding excuses. But as I am trying to get married, it seems as though most girls I talk to, even the ones that are now much more religious, have all had multiple relationships in the past, even if they weren't physically intimate. They have still gone on unsupervised dates and been alone with the opposite gender many times. Unfortunately, families make the halal difficult when the haram is very easy these days. So that was from the first one. There's a lot more, but that was the main thing. Now the second young person, I don't know if I'm going to get through everything he said. But I'll share some excerpts because he, again, was very, very frustrated. And at one point, he was moved to tears, man. And I said, I got to talk about this. Because it should not be this hard. Nobody should be crying because they want to get married and save themselves from haram. فقال, he said, these immigrant Muslims need to realize and understand that we live in America, and America is nothing like the countries they came from. This is not a land of religiosity or conservatism. This is a land of sexual liberation, a land of LGBTQ, a land of school dances and parties, a land of bikinis, high-heeled pumps and push-up bras, a land where promiscuity and immorality are the norm, and not participating in such acts makes one exceptionally strange. Then he says, our children are, in all caps, suffering. Brothers and sisters, when we made the decision to leave our lands with our children and to come here, we knew we were bringing them to a land that is not just passively un-Islamic, but a land that is diametrically opposed to Islam and actively promotes ideas, behavioral standards, and etiquettes that are opposed to Islam. And so, knowing that our children were going to be exposed to an ocean of evil, what plans did we make to ensure our children would be able to maintain their Islamic identity? The reality is we have failed to see the gravity of what we were placing our kids up against when we brought them here. So let us take a moment to examine exactly what our kids are up against. What our children are up against, what this society has to offer our children. Number one, he says, pornography. Sexually explicit music, sexually explicit movies, sexually explicit commercial advertisements, social media which allows them to have private conversations with any and all of their classmates of the opposite gender, free mixing inside and outside of school, school dances, parties, a public school culture which welcomes casual dating and even encourages it, non-Muslim influencers in the form of friends that constantly encourage them either passively or actively to participate in haram, recreational, sexual activities, he says. Brothers and sisters, he says, the Sahaba were very keen to get married and get their children married because they understood the fitna of being a young person. However, even they never experienced these types of trials that our children are experiencing today. How can we justify not opening the doors of marriage for our youth and making it easy for them? And the brother Jazallah Khair is very eloquent. He is very eloquent. He's articulating his feelings very, very well. I feel threatened now. I feel, subhanAllah, he might take my job. But he says, what's at stake? The possibility of our children turning their backs on the deen. Number two, falling into zina and receiving the punishment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this world and the next. Number three, falling off the sirat on the day of judgment. Number four, developing sexual addictions, becoming addicted to haram. Number five, turning to the secret habit. And I'll leave it to you to understand what the secret habit is. And last but not least, he said, going to Jahannam for a very, very, very long time. This was his message. Like I said, he was almost moved to tears, and so was I. And so this is what I would like to share. And I'd like to open up to you now to discuss this very, very important topic. فتفضلوا مشكورا. تفضل عمر.
Will inshallah, the idea that is going to be the solution, will that be approved by PICC and be adopted by PICC?
What do you mean? Clarify what you mean by that.
There are certain similar ideas and solutions that were mentioned in the past, but they were not adopted by PICC because of their concern that it might turn into a legal matter in the future. So I was wondering if the entity that would be holding this, will that be a PICC or some different entity, or how will it going to be running the solution?
Okay, so first of all, obviously there's a process. I can't speak to what will happen in the future. I can't imagine, I'll be honest with you, in all fairness, that a solution to the problem, which was Islamically correct and didn't violate any civil laws, which I don't think would come up with a solution that did that, would be rejected. I think that the administration and the people who run the mosque really want to do the right thing. And I don't think any of us, after hearing what we heard today and hearing what we heard just now, want to be an obstacle to two people who want to be married. And so what we have to do, Umar, is come up with a solution that makes sense. It's practical. And it shows our young people that we're serious about being facilitatory or facilitators. And I think if we do that, I think we'll be supported not just by the leadership, but also by our young people. I think what's happening right now is that we've got this generation gap, and we have got this this divide between ourselves and our young people. They're kind of off in their own orbit, and they just feel like religion doesn't speak to their reality, and their parents don't get it. The old people don't get it. We've got to show them that's not the case. And I think if we really do that, we'll win. We'll win on both fronts. We'll win with our kids, we'll win with our young people, and we'll win in terms of creating a solution that's viable, that works. I really believe that. I'm an eternal optimist. I believe where there's Allah, there's hope, right? Exactly. طيب تفضل عبد الرزاق.
Well, someone is involved in this for the youth here.
1 second. Muhammad. 1 second, Abd'Llah Razak. Muhammad, you know the two mics? Can you do me a huge favor? Will you bring one for Abd'Llah Razak and then one for the sisters? Jazakallah khair. I'm going to bring you a mic, Abd'Llah Razak. That way everybody can hear what you're saying. Huh? Yeah, we're live. Is that a problem? There's no warrant for your arrest. Trust me, there's no warrant, brother. I checked, brother. You're all good. We cleared all that up. You know the one where I took care of it. Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair. All right. So give one to Abdul Razak, and if you place one where the sisters can just snag it. Jazakallah khair. All right. Shukran laka. تفضل عبد الرزاق. Yes. وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
For someone who's been involved in the youth activities here for many years, so I relate very well to what you said.
Jazakallah khair.
Like I said, I've been consistently doing teaching the young people for almost 15 years here.
MashaAllah.
Alhamdulillah, one of the reasons why we advocated for land all these years is for this particular reason.
Okay.
Because we have seen most of the kids 5 years, 6 years old, 15, 17 years ago, grown now, and we're dealing with them, and we talk to them, so they're expressing the facts right now. I have spoken to quite a few of the boys, especially
Hey.
with the sisters. I think one of the things that will work is for the parents to be very proactive. We have to actually take the step to have a database of all these young people.
Mm-hmm.
Probably a prefect from the men's side and prefect from the women's side.
Hey.
If they trust you, they will talk.
Hey.
If they don't trust you, they won't say anything.
Hey.
So we have to identify those elderlies around us who can speak their language and be able to understand some of the problems. Like I said, I've spoken to quite a few.
Mm-hmm.
And it can work. They do feel their need. I mean, they've been around the market for a long time.
Hey.
But there is a divide between them and their parents.
Hey.
They don't talk to their parents.
SubhanAllah.
But they will talk to somebody they trust.
Right.
So we have to be able to take that proactive action to get the database on the boys on the men's side,
Mm-hmm.
and some sisters deal with the same thing on the women's side.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to try and connect these people.
Hey.
We have to. There is no other way we can do it, because some of the things that we hear, it's alarming.
Allah.
And I am aware of some of the stuff that they're doing already,
Yeah.
that they're being forced by society
Mm-hmm.
to do some of this stuff. And it's getting really worrisome. I'm extremely concerned. So we have to take the database, we have to talk to their parents, and we have to do something. Because they're getting older, and every single day that we miss in doing something, it gets them closer to what we don't need.
Yeah.
We don't want them to go.
Yes, SubhanAllah. You hit on three very, very important points that I'd like to piggyback on. The first one, so the first one is you talked about some of the things that are happening that are alarming. And I'm glad you said that, because it makes it clear that it's not just the Imam like fear-mongering or making something seem much worse than it is, but that other people who have their hand on the pulse of the community, particularly the community's youth, are confirming that, yeah, these things are happening. There is some frustration. There is some being pushed toward harm, and some people not being able to practice self-restraint. That's the first thing. So thank you for that. The second thing you mentioned was having a database. My thought process when first coming here, and I hope that we can make this a reality, is having a database where imams and community leaders have access, and they take pertinent information from eligible bachelors and bachelorettes, and they plug it into this database, which can only be accessed by imams and community leaders. It's not a free-for-all like some of these other apps that you see out here, right? Where a bunch of people are putting in information, the information might not be true, might be inaccurate, and they're connecting directly with people, with potential suitors, etc., and so on. Sometimes there's a lot of fraud, deception, and a lot of people who are just up to no good. So you can avoid a lot of that, you can circumvent a lot of that if you have just people who are responsible, who are putting the information in. They're collecting the information from people. A person says, yeah, I'm 35. Man, you are not 35. They'll say that, right? You're not 35. Stop lying. We're only going to put truthful information in here. You guys see that? So they would only have access, and the engine of the database would be such that when it takes the biographical information of the person and their preferences, it would create what? Matches. It would do the matches automatically. And that responsible person would get the matches and be able to present them to that person and ask them who they'd like to follow. If we had, for example, in the tri-state area, in the DMV, if we had imams and communities create such a database and be connected to it, we could do a lot for our young people in terms of helping them find suitable suitors. It's just a matter of networking, connecting. If you let me, because I'm not playing. So if we could do that, and everybody would cooperate, I think that would be a game changer for the young people in the tri-state area. That's the first thing. Or that's to speak to your second point. It's just a matter of the people with the know-how and the people in those positions to reach out and say, hey, we've got to do this. We know you guys are doing hikes, and we know you guys are doing social mixers, and we're not going to tell you what to do and what not to do, but can we do this too? And get everybody to buy in and do this. It's not hard. We've got all the technical know-how in our communities. It's a matter of what? Just sitting down and saying, hey, let's do this, and getting the people in the room who can make it happen, tell them what we envision, and they can do that. That's the second thing. The third thing that you spoke to was the divide. And this is where we as parents, we just have to put in a lot of work. We have to put in a lot of work to build up trust such that our young people will come to us and talk to us openly and candidly about these types of things. And we're also going to have to stop being so cultural. We're going to have to realize that we're in a different place, and we've got to adapt to our surroundings and our environment and the present circumstances. And we have to speak to our kids in a way where we're telling them, look, you can talk to me. And we have to create a safe space for those conversations. They can say anything. They won't be judged. They won't be cursed. They won't be beaten. They won't be threatened. They won't be mistreated. They can say whatever they need to say, and you're not going to necessarily like it, but whatever the issue is, we can work through it together in a very rational and reasonable way. And once they feel comfortable talking to us, and we know the raw reality of what's going on, we can develop a plan to respond to it together, arm in arm. But if we don't do that, we continue to make them feel like I can't talk to my father, I can't talk to my mom, they're going to continue to what? To do it on their own. And these kids, their minds are still developing. They're not in a position where they need to be out there, where they can be preyed on. They can be preyed upon. We don't need to let that happen. So we've got to be there to protect them and to help them and to guide them. But they won't let us do that if they don't trust us. There's, like you said, that divide. So Jazakallah khair, you know, 3 very important points, and I appreciate for you giving me the opportunity to kind of follow up on those. Do the sisters have anything they'd like to say? تفضلي.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
May Allah protect our families, our children, our offspring.
Ameen.